You may know that at the beginning of the 2022 season, Iowa was essentially a shoo-in to win another national team title, and at the very least, heavy favorites. With 10 starters coming back into the lineup, 6 seniors, and 7 returning All-Americans, they were going to be tough to beat. Now, of course, number 2 Penn State was right on their tail with a couple of transfers coming into the lineup and all of their returning national champions. Similar stories can be said for Oklahoma State, Arizona State, and Michigan, who are right on the tails of the Hawkeyes and gunning for that team title. But when Iowa has one guy at 125 pounds who can score 25 national points for the team by himself, that's tough to beat. So when news broke that Spencer Lee was out for the remainder of the season, I was shocked. And then I was upset and saddened for him. But now I'm curious. Can Iowa still win a national title without Spencer Lee? Let's stop stalling and start talking wrestling. What's going on, wrestling fans? My name is Josiah, and welcome to Fanco Wrestling, your source for college wrestling news and discussion. If this is your first time here, welcome, and why don't you hit that subscribe button to stay updated on everything going on in college wrestling. Now, last year, Spencer Lee and the Iowa Hawkeyes scored 129 team points and won the national title. They overscored Penn State, who only scored 113.5 points, and were actually closer than a lot of people thought. Oklahoma State finished in third, just shy of 100 points. And even with Penn State's 4 champions, they still couldn't beat the Iowa Hawkeyes, showing how tough that team was to beat. Now, I think about this with Iowa going into the national championships and pretty much all of their duels. I think of this as like if Batman and Superman were going to fight, but Batman had a bunch of kryptonite already ready, Superman would be at a huge disadvantage going into that fight. That's basically how teams are when they're walking into Carver Hawkeye and Spencer Lee's coming out and likely getting a pin, at the very least, a bonus point win. That's how tough he is. And I really want to hammer this down, how much of a detriment it is to lose Spencer Lee, who's one of the toughest guys, not only in college wrestling, but like on the planet, in my opinion. Anyway, Spencer has scored many points for the Iowa Hawkeyes during his time at the national championships, scoring as high as 28 points in 1 year and averaging around 25 points for the team. He's won 11 of his 15 matches at the national championships by bonus point. That's impressive. That's like, in last year, he scored 20%, almost 20% of Iowa's total team points by himself. And moreover, he's been, basically guaranteed to win the title at 125 pounds. Maybe not his freshman year, but since then, he's been heavily favored to win at 125 pounds. Of course, that was like before everybody knew about the ACLs and all of that scenario, but he was still going out there and dominating guys. So without him, Iowa is essentially down 25 points. So what can they do to make up for that lack and loss of points this year? Can they still win? And in my opinion, it's going to be tough because Iowa's guys are, like I said, they have a tough lineup. And the guys that they have in the lineup are already ranked high. And it's going to be hard for them to jump up a couple spots. You look at a Jaden Ironman or a Michael Kemmer, who are number 2 in the country. There's only so much higher they can go. And even Austin DeSanto and Anthony Cassiope, Jacob Warner, those guys are like number 3, number 4. They can only go so much higher. And as we look at the team points, like this is the placement points. So if you place that, there's the points you get over here in this graphic. You go from 3rd place to 1st place, like a DeSanto, if he was to win it this year, he would add just 6 points from going from 3rd to 1st. So, yeah, it helps, but it's also going to be tough. From 2nd to 1st adds a 4-point difference in the team score. And Cassiope, yeah, he's going to have a tough time. Like at all these weights, right? But Cassiope at heavyweight, it's going to be tough for him to beat Gable Steveson at heavyweight. So, really, he's limited in how much better he can do. He's going to have to perform for the team, but it's going to be tough to get that. And Kemmer, he's at one of the toughest weights in the entire NCAA at 174 pounds. Marinelli, similar scenario at 165, which is tougher than ever. And even DeSanto, he's beaten RBY in the past, but RBY's gotten the better of him. So what's the team race really going to come down to? Because I mean, what I just said didn't really sound that exciting for Iowa, right? So this is what it's going to come down to. It's going to come down to those round of 12 and round of 16 guys and how well they can do for the Iowa Hawkeyes. You look at Caleb Young at 157, who is in a bit of a, didn't have the best collegiate wrestling duels, but has done well in the past, and All-American in the past, and could get onto the stand this year again. But he's going to have to do that if Iowa wants to win. Abe Assad at 184. He actually never wrestled at the NCAAs before. Nelson Brands was in the spot last year. Now he's down at 174, and Abe Assad seems to be the starter at 184. It's tough wrestling your first national championships and getting onto the stand, but he's going to have to perform well if he wants to win for Iowa. And then Max Murin, who's made the blood round twice, indicating that he is right there with the rest of those guys. That's where your points are really going to be added up. If you go from the blood round and then get onto the stand at like the 5th through 6th place matches, you can add like 7-8 points plus to your team's score. And you get more matches, which means you get more points to potentially score bonus points. But there's an issue for Iowa, and that is all the teams gunning for them, right? Penn State has been trending upwards because Drew Hildebrandt entering the lineup, Max Dean in the lineup and doing very well for Penn State. And they perform very well at the NCAA championships, even in their quote-unquote down years. Last year, remember, they had 4 national champions. That was crazy. Now, they have a very real potential to have 4 or 5 champions again. That's not even to mention Drew Hildebrandt starting at 125, who at this point, 125 is, I don't want to say it's wide open because it's not necessarily wide open, but it's more wide open than when Spencer Lee was the dominant guy at the weight. Yeah, you still have Nick Suriano there. He's going to be tough, but maybe Drew Hildebrandt could wrestle him tough, right? And that just adds more points to another team. So in order for Iowa to win, they're going to have to get the newcomer, whether it's Ybarra or Drake Ayala, who's actually a really tough wrestler, placed at the Southern Scuffle recently. One of those guys is going to have to get onto the stand at 125 to make up for those points. They're not going to score as many points as Spencer Lee, not going to necessarily get the bonus points, but if they can get a guy onto the stand, that at least helps make up that gap just a little bit. Murin and Young must crack the blood round. They have to get past the blood round and onto the stand. Marinelli, although he's not performed the best at the national championships, this has got to be his year. If he wants to do well for the team, he's got to perform to his best. And then Ironman and Kemmerer are going to have to beat those Penn State guys. They're going to have to beat Nick Lee and Carter Sirachi. And if an Iowa and Penn State guy are in a direct head-to-head matchup, they're going to have to beat them. And hope that Penn State loses out in some of those other spots. Because if one of those Penn State guys who were the champs last year goes from first to maybe losing in the semis to like a 3rd place, that's a lot. That's a pretty big loss for the team and really closes that gap. So can Iowa still win the title without Spencer Lee? Yes, it's possible, but it's going to be a lot more difficult to win without Spencer Lee. I give them a better shot against Penn State in a duel, and I think that they still are the favorites in a duel meet, but when it comes to winning a team title, it's going to be tough. I'd like to know your thoughts. Do you think Iowa, Oklahoma State, Penn State or Oklahoma State or another team can beat Iowa, or are the Hawkeyes still going to take home the trophy? And if you're interested in a stats video, I broke down Penn State's 10 best national championships of all time right here. Check that out.